Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take information often from you, our listeners, and really boil it down to the key insights.
Get you what you need quickly, keep it engaging.
Exactly. And today we're diving into Alzheimer's drug development. A listener sent us Dr. Jeffrey Cummings' big plenary lecture from the ADPD 2025 meeting.
Vienna, yeah. It's based on data right up to January 1st this year, 2025. So pretty fresh.
Right. So think of this as your fast track to understanding the current Alzheimer's research landscape.
Yeah, and where it might be headed. Dr. Cummings is, a major figure here. His analysis pulls heavily from clinicaltrials.gov.
And we're going to distill that for you, skipping the super technical jargon.
The main goal, really.
And the headline seems, well, pretty positive. Sounds like there's real excitement building.
Definitely. Dr. Cummings highlighted forward momentum, more trials, more drugs being tested, more diverse approaches, too.
He mentioned a boost in phase 1 trials specifically.
Yeah, especially biologics. That's often a good sign for the future pipeline.
Okay, so we'll cover the trial phases, the targets they're aiming for, some interesting observations about how the trials themselves are run.
Things like where they're happening, who's sponsoring them, repurposed drugs, that kind of thing.
And we'll touch on results we might see soon and the role of biomarkers.
Which seems increasingly important. Okay, let's get into the methodology first. How is this all put together?
Right. So the main source, as you said, clinicaltrials.gov.
Yep. He noted it captures maybe 85% of all trials. Not everything, but, the vast majority.
And that date, January 1st, 2025. That's the key cutoff.
Exactly. It gives a fixed snapshot. Anything starting January 2nd, well, that's for the next update.
And the whole point of this kind of analysis?
Ultimately, it's about helping trials run better, speeding up drug development. For patients, that's the goal.
So what does the pipeline actually look like right now? Can you paint a picture?
Sure. So as of that date, 182 active trials.
Okay.
And those trials are looking at 138 unique drug candidates. Some drugs, remember, are in multiple trials.
Got it. And how do those break down?
The biggest chunk, about 74%, are now called disease-targeted therapies.
Ah, interesting shift in wording there. Not disease-modifying anymore.
Yeah, it's a subtle but maybe more realistic shift. Focuses on hitting a specific biological target involved in the disease process.
Okay. And within those disease-targeted drugs, what types are we seeing?
It's actually remarkably balanced. About 59% are small molecules, think pills usually, and 41% are biologics. These are often more complex, maybe infusions, injections, things like that.
Nearly an even split. That's interesting. What about the rest of the pipeline?
So beyond those, 14% are cognitive enhancers aiming for memory, thinking improvements,
Right.
and 11% are neuropsychiatric drugs. Those target behavioral symptoms like agitation.
Okay. And you mentioned repurposed drugs earlier.
Yes, a big slice. 33%, a third of the pipeline, are repurposed agents.
Wow. So drugs already approved for something else.
Exactly. Now being tested to see if they work for Alzheimer's.
Now, you flagged that phase 1 activity, particularly for biologics. Why is that seen as so significant?
Well, this is where you get a real sense of future direction, Phase 1 is the first time a drug goes into humans, mostly checking safety.
Right.
So a big surge there, especially with complex biologics, suggests there's growing confidence in these newer approaches. They might be able to tackle the biology in ways earlier drugs couldn't.
So it hints at potentially more novel therapies coming down the pike.
Precisely. It's a leading indicator, if you will.
Okay, more drugs, more studies. But what exactly are they targeting in the brain? What aspects of Alzheimer's?
So the analysis uses something called the CA-DIRO system.
Tiger.
Yeah, Common Alzheimer's Disease Research Ontology. It's basically a standardized way to classify what biological problem a drug is trying to fix.
Makes sense, like categories.
Exactly. And the pipeline right now represents 15 different CA-DIRO targets.
15? That sounds quite diverse.
It really is. And this might surprise you, given the headlines. Drugs targeting amyloid. Only 18% of the pipeline.
Only 18%? Wow. So the idea that it's all about amyloid is just not accurate?
Not anymore. Certainly not based on the current pipeline. It's much broader.
So what else is getting a lot of focus then?
Tau is definitely growing. That's the other protein involved in tangles. 15 agents targeting tau.
Okay.
Inflammation in the immune system, huge area. Lots of activity there.
Uh-huh.
Transmitter receptors are well represented too, which makes sense because that includes those cognitive enhancers and neuropsychiatric drugs.
Right, the symptom-focused ones.
Exactly. And then metabolism, bioenergetics, how brain cells get energy, that's also got significant representation.
What about synaptic plasticity? I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, that's about connections between neurons, crucial for memory. It actually saw a small dip this year, down to 6%. Bioenergetics and metabolism were also around 6%.
So if you combine amyloid and tau targets.
You get 35 agents in total, specifically going after one or both of those key proteins. Still significant, but definitely not the whole story.
Okay, let's shift to the trials themselves. How does this year's snapshot compare to last year's? Any major shifts?
Well, comparing Jan 1, 2025 to Jan 1, 2024. Phase 3, the big final stage, same number of trials. Phase 2 saw a slight decrease, actually.
Oh.
But as we said, Phase 1 saw that significant growth, which Dr. Cummings really framed as, a reason for optimism.
The pipeline is refilling at the early stages.
Exactly. And even better news, 56 brand new trials were initiated in the last year.
56?
Yeah.
Wow. How does that compare?
Much better than the year before, which only saw 31 new trials start. So it looks like research activity is really picking up again since around 2019.
That's definitely good to hear. What about the trials already running? Are they moving forward, hitting problems?
It's definitely dynamic. There are 16 trials currently in long-term extension phases.
So following patients longer.
Right. 25 trials finished completely in the past year, so we're getting data back from those.
Yeah.
But 8 trials were terminated early.
Okay. Any reason why? Or just stopped?
The analysis didn't detail reasons for each, but trials stopped for various reasons: lack of funding, safety issues, lack of efficacy.
Sure.
And then there were 8 trials Dr. Cummings called zombie trials.
Zombie trials?
Yeah, ones that haven't updated their status on clinicaltrials.gov in at least 2 years. So their actual status is a bit, unknown.
Huh. Okay. Let's circle back to those repurposed drugs. You said a third of the pipeline. What's their typical journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of them are in phase 2.
Why phase 2 mainly?
Well, they usually skip phase 1 because we already know they're generally safe from their original use, right?
That makes sense.
But relatively few actually make it all the way to phase 3.
Oh, like
particularly if they're generic drugs. Without new patent protection, there's less commercial incentive for a big company to fund a huge, expensive phase 3 trial.
I see. So they often stall after phase 2.
Often, yes. Unless there's maybe a new formulation or some new intellectual property potential.
So if they don't always become new approved treatments, why are those phase 2 trials still so valuable?
Oh, they're incredibly valuable. They help develop better ways to measure the disease, test out new biomarkers,
Right.
figure out better ways to recruit patients for other trials, confirm if a certain biological pathway is worth targeting.
So they advance the whole field, even if that specific drug doesn't cross the finish line.
Exactly. They build knowledge, train staff, improve infrastructure. It all helps the development of the next potential breakthrough, maybe a novel drug.
Are researchers looking at combining therapies? Using more than one drug at a time?
Yes, definitely. There are 20 combination trials happening right now.
20. Okay.
10 are what they call pharmacodynamic combos, different drugs, different effects, hoping for synergy.
And the other 10?
Pharmacokinetic combos. Maybe one drug helps the other work better, or reduces its side effects, or helps it get into the brain. Shows growing interest in multi-target approaches.
Who's actually funding and running all these trials? Is it mostly big pharma?
Overall, yes. Industry sponsors 62% of all trials.
Okay.
And for phase 3, those really large, expensive trials, it jumps to 75% industry sponsored.
Makes sense. They require a huge investment.
They do. But phase 2 is interesting. It's basically a 50-50 split.
50-50.
Yeah.
Between industry
Or
and...
non-industry groups. So academic centers, hospitals, government agencies like the NIH, nonprofits.
So a lot of the earlier, maybe more exploratory innovation comes from outside industry.
That's what it suggests, yeah.
Yep.
Academics often establish the proof of concept before industry might jump in for the bigger trials.
Right. Now, running all these trials takes people, a lot of people volunteering.
Yeah.
Any sense of the scale?
It's staggering, really. The estimate is about 50,000 participants needed across all active trials right now.
50,000.
Yeah. And phase 3 trials alone account for maybe 33,000 of that.
Wow.
And that doesn't even count the caregivers, the families supporting them. It's a huge commitment from patients and their loved ones.
Absolutely underscores their contribution. Where are these trials happening? Is it mostly U.S.-based?
It varies by phase. Phase 1 and a lot of phase 2 tend to be heavily concentrated in North America.
Okay, yeah.
But phase 3 trials, The vast majority are global.
Global, so sites all over.
Yeah, North America, Europe, Asia, other regions. You need that global reach to recruit the thousands of diverse participants needed for phase 3.
We always hear that recruitment is tough for Alzheimer's trials. Did the analysis shed light on that?
It did, and yeah, slow recruitment is still a major bottleneck. It's quite stark sometimes.
How so?
Well, compare the time spent treating patients in a trial versus the time spent finding enough patients to even start.
Okay.
For neuropsychiatric trials, for example, average treatment is maybe 12 months. Average recruitment time, 138 weeks.
Whoa. Over 2.5 years to recruit for a 3-month treatment phase.
Exactly. It highlights the challenge. Biologics trials tend to recruit the fastest, neuropsych trials the slowest.
Any idea why neuropsych is so slow?
Likely complex. Enrolling patients with severe agitation or psychosis, getting them consistently to trial sites, it's difficult. It really points to needing more flexible approaches, like maybe more in-home assessments.
Yeah, that disparity is really something. What about the places running the trials? The clinics, the hospitals?
This was a new analysis area Dr. Cummings included. There are about 4,500 trial sites globally, roughly half in North America, half outside.
Okay, 4,500 sites.
But here's the kicker. About 75% of those sites are only running one Alzheimer's trial.
3/4 are doing just one study.
Yeah, which made Dr. Cummings wonder, could we be more efficient? Maybe fewer sites, but sites that do more trials build more expertise.
Interesting thought. Fewer, higher volume,
Yeah.
maybe more experienced centers.
Potentially, something the field might need to consider. Another point was geographic distribution. Only 7% of sites are in low and middle income countries.
Only 7%. That highlights a real disparity in global research access.
It certainly does.
Looking forward then, what results might we expect to see in 2025? Any big readouts coming?
Yes, 2025 could be quite revealing. We're expecting results readouts from 12 phase 3 trials.
12 phase 3. Okay, what kinds?
6 are disease-targeted therapies, 2 are cognitive enhancers, and 4 are neuropsychiatric drugs.
So, potential answers across different approaches. What about phase 2?
29 phase 2 trials are expected to complete this year, spanning lots of different targets, transmitters, inflammation, amyloid, synaptic function.
So a lot of data potentially coming in across the board soon.
Exactly. Should give us a much clearer picture on several fronts.
Okay, lastly, biomarkers. You mentioned they're increasingly important. What did the analysis show there?
Absolutely central. And Dr. Cummings announced a new big project funded by the ADDF, the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, to build a biomarker database and observatory.
Wow. Shows how critical they've become.
Totally. They can help shorten trials, diagnose accurately, select the right patients, monitor safety. Huge potential.
So how are they being used in trials right now?
Well, this was a preliminary look, but 57% of trials use biomarkers as part of their eligibility criteria.
To decide who gets into the trial.
Right. Like MRI scans are used in 32%, often to exclude people with strokes or tumors. Amyloid PET scans in 26%. Fluid biomarkers from blood or spinal fluid used for eligibility in 29%. That includes specific ones like a beta or p-tau, each used in about 9% of trials. Sometimes it's just listed as fluid biomarker without specifics yet.
And are they being used to measure if the drug actually worked as an outcome?
Yes. In 27% of trials, a biomarker is a primary outcome measure.
Okay.
Fluid biomarkers are the most common primary outcome, used in 12% of trials. Amyloid PET and MRI are each primary outcomes in about 5%.
So the use of biomarkers is definitely growing and getting more sophisticated.
Clearly, it's a major trend shaping the field.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this deep dive up. Based on Dr. Cummings' big analysis, what are the main things you think our listeners should take away?
I'd say first, there's real, tangible, positive momentum. The pipeline is growing. It's active.
Good. What else?
Second, it's getting much more diverse. It's not just about amyloid anymore. Many targets are being explored.
Right, that 18% figure was eye-opening.
Third, biomarkers are absolutely crucial now, and their role is only expanding, from eligibility to outcomes.
Okay.
Fourth, phase 2 seems like a real engine of innovation. Lots happening there, often driven by non-industry research and those repurposed drugs.
The 50-50 split.
Yeah. Fifth, the incredible number of patients and families involved, especially in those huge global phase 3 trials. Their contribution is immense.
Absolutely.
And finally, despite the progress, recruitment remains a significant challenge that needs ongoing attention and new strategies.
This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Really helps to get that kind of clear, comprehensive picture of such a complex field.
Glad we could break it down.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. to chew on from all this.
Yeah, how about this? That finding that 75% of trial sites are only running a single Alzheimer's study?
Yeah.
What if that shifted?
Towards fewer, bigger, more experienced centers.
Right. What would that mean for how fast research moves, for the quality? And what are the implications, maybe ethical ones, of where these sites are located, especially thinking about that low number in lower income countries, something to really consider.